is Michelle de Kretser. I was born in Colombo, Sri Lanka. I immigrated to Australia with my family in 1972. Immigrated to Melbourne, but now I live in Sydney. Since late 1999, I have been a published writer of mainly of fiction, although I have also had a small book of literary criticism published. But I'm essentially a novelist, and my most recent novel was published in October last year. So I've been publishing in Australia for about 22 years, and my work is published also in the UK and the US, and in translation. So that's my involvement in the field. It's a complex question, or rather it's a simple question, but it requires a complex answer. I mean, I think on the one hand, we have an institution called the Australia Council for the Arts, which is government funded, and there are grants provided to every branch of the arts to practitioners in those fields. So there's a literature division, and writers can apply several times a year for funding for new work, or you know, to maybe travel overseas if that's necessary for their work. The Australia Council runs residencies for writers in Paris and Rome, so you can apply to stay in the Australian-owned studios in those places for 3 to 6 months. So I would say that on the one hand, there is very good support for the arts compared to many other countries, compared to Sri Lanka, obviously, but also to many other places in the world. However, it's also true that funding to the arts has been cut and cut and cut and cut in recent years, ever since the start of this century, more or less. So there are more and more writers applying for these grants I mentioned, and fewer are successful. So you know, that is a problem. Well, most of the states, I think, in Australia have literary prizes, which are sponsored by the state government, and these usually cover, you know, fiction, non-fiction, poetry, sometimes children's literature, and so on. There are also privately funded awards. One of these is called the Stella Prize for fiction, non-fiction poetry by Australian women. But there's also the Myers Franklin Award, which is the best known award, which is just for the best novel written by an Australian writer. So there is that, you know, writers enter those prizes hoping to get to be successful, but obviously all prizes are a sort of lottery, and that can't be relied on. There are also residencies within Australia, usually, you know, some foundation or other offers writers the opportunity to apply to go away for a week and work on their books, or maybe for longer, for 3 weeks or a month or whatever. But again, these are wonderful, but obviously, you know, for writers who have children, for instance, young children, that can be difficult to take advantage of. Nevertheless, I think really I would feel very spoilt speaking to a Sri Lankan audience if I didn't say that there was a reasonable level of support for literature in Australia. But as a developed Western country, I would say also that Australia should be doing much more. And I feel that out there in the general culture, there is much more respect and admiration and interest in sporting achievements, for instance, rather than literary achievements. So to give you an example of this, when Peter Carey, who's an Australian writer, won the Booker Prize, the Man Booker Prize, for the second time, which is quite amazing. That story was on page 3 of the national broadsheet, whereas, an Australian athlete winning gold in the Olympics would definitely be on page 1. So I think we could do better, but everything is relative, and I feel that the intention at least is there to try to support the arts in Australia, and lots of people work very hard to that end to try and lobby the government for more funding and so on. I would say the first thing is to read, and to read widely and long in whatever genre you are working. So if you want to write poetry, read lots and lots and lots and lots of poetry. And similarly, if you want to write a novel, read lots and lots and lots of novels. This is somewhere where Australia really does have an advantage, because we have a lot of public libraries. I don't know what the situation is in Sri Lanka, but I am guessing that there are nowhere near as that libraries are nowhere near as easy to access library holdings for the average person. So, writers come from readers. I know writers who haven't been to university and who are very good writers and successful writers, but they read, they have always read. So that is the absolutely, you can't go past it as a first step. You have to read, and read thoughtfully and learn from what you read. The other thing I would say is that when you do write, you need to revise your work. You need to be a rigorous critic of your own work and revise it. So when you have written something and completed it, it's a joyful moment. And you should be proud of that and celebrate that privately or with someone who's close to you, a friend, a family member. But you shouldn't really show it to anyone else at that stage. You should put it away, put it in a drawer for a month, then take it out, look at it, and you will see problems, and revise, start revising, cut, change things, move things around. And when you've finished that, you will have a second draft. And then I would say put it away again for another 2 weeks at least, and then go through the process again. Just to give you an idea, I before I send anything to my publisher, it would have been through 4 drafts. So we're talking about, a novel. So that would be like a minimum, 60, 70,000 words, often longer. It's a long process, but it's really worth doing, because a publisher really only looks at things once, and you want to show them your very, very, very best work. Same if you're entering it for literary prizes, you need to enter really, really polished work. So, also just the basic things like, if you're using a word processor, which I guess most people are these days, you need to do a spelling and grammar check. at the very least. But your work really, a judge of a literary prize or a publisher um, really just reads something once, and you have to be your work has to be, wearing its best clothes and with its hair neatly combed and clean fingernails and shiny shoes, for it to get past all the other people who are hoping to be noticed by that judge or by that publisher. There are a lot of writers out there in the world, a lot of writers. So it really takes that sort of steady commitment to your craft, to your work, to get to get your work out there and get it noticed. I am so pleased and so proud to be a member of Australia and Sri Lanka, because even though my passport is Australian, I will always be Sri Lankan as well. Sri Lanka, is still a very important place for me and an important place in my work. And I am just so honored to be part of the celebration of 75 years of diplomatic relations between these two countries that are so dear to me.